Welcome, welcome to the Empowered Team podcast. I am your host, Kari Schneider, and I'm so grateful to be here with Andrea Wanerstrand. She is a rock star here. We've got, as a leadership strategist and executive coach, she has over 25 years of experience in all kinds of organizations. We're talking big and complex organizations, Microsoft, Meta, T-Mobile. So she's crafted her own ways of doing things that really allow people, the humans who run things, the people who lead, to get results. And so I am very, very excited to be on here with Andrea and be able to pick her brain on a few things. So welcome, Andrea. And how are you today? Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. Excited to be joining you and your audience.
Wonderful, wonderful. So first off, I've barely done your biography any justice at all. I've literally just thrown a couple little nuggets in there. Tell us a little more about how you got to where you are now and what's been in your career and how you ended up here.
Sure. I actually started out in telecommunications in IT program management. That was my first 18 years. And I had a client who was the VP of HR at T-Mobile. She saw something in me. She pulled me aside one day and she's like, I need to talk to you. And I was like, stakeholder needs to talk to you out of like the regular cadence. Your ears kind of perk up and you go, okay. And she goes, I have an opportunity on my team. And I've noticed that while you're fantastic at your job, your eyes kind of glaze over when you're talking bug reports and release cycles, but you'll light up when you talk about the people part. And so that was in the early 2000s. And that sparked my passion for all things human centric. I felt I needed to go get something touchy feely. So I went and got certified as a professional coach, which really wasn't a big thing back in like 2004. And from there, I've had the privilege and the learning curve of working in organizations, looking at how to change cultures and really move the dial on performance for individuals and for full teams. About 4 years ago, I went off on my own after 25 years in corporate America. And I have a bit of a portfolio, but it's brought me to our conversation today. I lead a team called A3 Culture Lab, where we look at building cultures, but I also love the work that I do with individuals in building the mindset to have the resilience to have the self awareness and the confidence to step into whatever they want to achieve.
Wow. Okay, you've said so much here that I just want to dive right into. Um, your what you've created sounds amazing, first off. But I'm curious about this other little part where you lit up around people and what makes people tick, perhaps, how people operate. But you're kind of like, okay, I could do the reports all day long if I have to, but I'm going to be suffering a little bit if I do. But that's where a lot of people would potentially go down the route of HR or be in a little bit of a different role. What has given you that spark to take it another level of really working on culture and one-on-one coaching and strategy? And what had you be intrigued by those parts of things?
Well, how work gets done is really the catalyst for how high performing you can be. And during my tenure at Microsoft, we went through a bit of a shift, going from Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer's leadership, which and the advent of the cloud, as it was called then. Now it's just, our regular normal way of doing things. But we really had to go from what Satya Nadella, the current CEO, and when he came in, from being a know-it-all to a learn-it-all culture. Microsoft in the environment that I did readiness and did learning and development for leadership in was really transactional. And how do you create an environment that is more advisory or looks at all the possibilities? And yes, we brought in Carol Dweck at the time, which introduced the growth mindset, but you don't flip that switch overnight from that know it all to learn it all. And it really sparked something in me as to if you can do that at such a scale as a global company like Microsoft, how can you do that elsewhere? And then you look at all the changes that come along. And whether it's technology, right now, the big thing is AI, obviously. But I've been at this long enough that, 25 plus years ago, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the iPhone. So there's big disruption that actually becomes your new norm. And all people handle change differently. So it is a fascinating Rubik's cube for me about how do you manage change? How do you handle change? And how do you lead change when change is happening every day?
This is really powerful. When it comes to change, what have you seen people really struggle with when it comes to all these different technological disruptions or advancements? And what have you seen people have more ease with, or is there any ease with change? Like what have been the biggest challenges when it comes to change for people that you've seen?
The biggest change is how well you deal with ambiguity. And so it's a level of comfort and confidence, and comfort zone. And if you are not confident in your own ability to be able to navigate ambiguity, like no matter what's thrown at me, I'm going to be okay. You resist. We are fight or flight. We want consistency as humans. Otherwise, we are ready to defend. And that's just our core programming. So, someone who's actually built up their confidence, and its confidence is not a destination. It's an ongoing, never-ending cycle where you get some new experience and you get to a new comfort zone. But once you can get across that threshold of, I'm confident that no matter what's thrown at me, I will find a way,
Mhm.
you're able to navigate. It still doesn't make it easy, but it's more doable and you have less mental stress because of it and sometimes physical stress because of it.
Wow. That's powerful. And I know that for many of the people that I work with or coach, confidence is one of those um, emotional states or characteristics that most people in leadership roles seek. That's what they want to feel if they're going into almost any situation, whether it's hiring, firing, negotiating, whatever it is. So when it comes to characteristics or values, what how do some of your values align with what you teach, or how has that evolved for you personally?
Yeah, the whole fake it till you make it is you're bound to fail because you will fail at something. And we as humans know a mask versus somebody's like authentic, like the real person underneath. And so being authentic with integrity, and I'm not talking oversharing. I'm like a big Brene Brown fan, and she's like, no faux crying, no oversharing, but being consistent in your presence so that people know what to expect, especially if the big bad thing, whatever that may be, happens, they know that you're going to work through it rather than go into a blame game or anything else around you. So, building up your confidence that you're going to be able to be as even keeled as possible, manage your emotions, know where and when to get out frustrations, and how to show up in a forward thinking rather than a blame or um, targeting and saying, it's your fault. It still might be their fault, but how you navigate that and how you bring people forward, that level of confidence that, yeah, this really stinks that X, Y, or Z happened. I'm going to move us forward though, because I don't want to dwell in that bad. I want to move it forward. And I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I know at least I want to move it forward. That level of confidence, in order to start getting curious with that growth mindset to make something good out of something that's not optimal, that is the differentiator for those that can navigate and will succeed.
Yeah. This is awesome. Like, you've just described so many of the things that can yield the positive outcomes or the successes or whatever a leader might want or a company might want. And ultimately, these are values and traits that make a great leader. Things like you've said: authenticity, vulnerability, consistency, confidence, managing one's emotions, growth mindset, forward thinking without being blaming as well if there is a conflict or a challenge. All of these things, to me, I hear a lot of emotional intelligence. Where do you see that when it comes to the workplace or its role or the state of the importance of emotional intelligence now versus 25 years ago, or wherever you want to go with it?
Well, 25 years ago, no one was talking about emotional
Right? Yeah, there you go.
I would say even a decade ago, people were just maybe starting to talk about how you feel at work. And I would argue even today in today's workplace, there's the professional you and the work you. But here's the reality: our nervous system and the way we regulate our emotions, which are physically charged, right? They don't know, we don't know, our nervous system does not know the difference between a personal you and a work you. And those emotions want to get out. And so folks often think of getting angry or like, which is inappropriate in the workplace as far as throwing a tantrum. But your emotion will want to get out. Think about a good belly laugh, right? That belly laugh is you can't stop laughing. That is part of the emotion wanting to come out. So emotional regulation and being aware of those emotions as they're coming to your thinking brain. So you have your nervous system, you have neurons in your gut, you have neurons in your heart, and you have neurons in your thinking brain. Before it ever hits your thinking brain, the emotions and that energy is sending messages up. And so it might look like you're tapping your foot, or your tightness in your chest, or your shoulders tense up. And those are flags that you can learn about yourself. Everybody has their own unique blueprint of emotional signals, that something's going on. And you need to get curious about that so that you know when that pattern is starting. Ah, something's going on here for me, so that you can regulate it. You also have to be intentional with how you're going to make people feel. And what I mean by that is, we sometimes think we're being kind by not saying the hard thing, but that actually can diminish others. Maybe we take the work away from them because we're not confident in it, because we're not giving them the feedback that they need. And I'd rather be kind with honest, constructive observation patterns and say, how can I help? And be a partner to move them forward, rather than diminishing that and not stepping in. And we don't step in generally because we're trying to keep ourselves safe.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for us. We're managing our own um, fear level, our hurt levels, if you want. We put what we think would happen to us if somebody did that to us, and rather than thinking of how would we like it done to us so that we would improve and feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Navigating your emotions in a way that you regulate and get intentional with your presence, and then how that impacts others. That emotional intelligence is key to human centricity in today's workplace.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. When you describe this, and I think of some of the companies you worked with and some of the leaders you've been exposed to, what kind of are these some of the traits, or what kind of traits do you see in some of the best leaders that you've worked with?
The best leaders that I've worked with are emotionally regulated. They know how to move their team in a way that keeps them out of fight or flight, because they want innovation, they want agility, they want creativity. And we physically cannot process and do that as humans. We are either innovative and thoughtful and creative, or we're in fear. And it is just an undividable realm in our brains. So they know that even though they have all the same emotions that the leader that instills more fear with others does, because they're like, why didn't they get that right? I mean, you can imagine the same talk tracks, but what they do with it in order to get the ultimate outcome that they want is the differentiator. And yes, you do see that I see that in all the organizations I worked in and still work in today in my consulting and some of the teamwork that I do. But large or small, it always comes down to the individual leader. They set a subculture within their company, no matter what size it is.
Isn't that interesting? I've seen this over and over as well, where sometimes the leaders, especially if they're new to the role, they don't understand how much they are creating what's going on around them. They might complain about things at various points, or they might realize someone needs to be fired or something needs to happen. But sometimes they don't quite see, wait a second, I'm contributing to this. And that's where often I might be in a position of supporting or coming in to help with culture or help with coaching. And that brings me to what you mentioned on culture. There's that quote that is a Peter Drucker quote, which is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You've mentioned culture now. How important do you see this in the workplace environments, especially since you worked with such complex organizations?
Yeah, there's aspirational statements. Every company has the culture statement as part of their recruiting plan and as a North Star. But culture is exactly to that quote, how things get done. And you can have the best laid plans and the best laid strategy. But if it's not scalable, if people are living in fear, they're not making clear decisions in a timely manner, they're not agile, they're not looking for all the creative possibilities, they're not advising your clients in a manner that you want them to. And that fear is not always about the really command and control type leader. They can be in fear because they're not getting that feedback. They can have what I call the super nice leader, right? But they're not giving the information and the transparency that someone needs to be able to navigate, or they're micromanaging their team
Mm-hmm.
in the guise of helping them. And then they get upset that, like, these people should know this. Why do they keep coming to me? Well, you've created an overdependence.
Mm-hmm.
The aspect of culture is basically how work gets done and what you allow to be acceptable and not acceptable. Like, if people don't have to meet their deadlines, people are not going to meet the deadlines. That's part of your culture.
Yeah, this is powerful because the with the idea of we teach people how to treat us, we also teach people or groups what is, as you say, acceptable or not acceptable. What are our standards as a group? What is how do we perform in this situation or that situation? Because then it becomes a larger picture that an individual is stepping into or living up to that's beyond them. And that's the culture. It's beyond the one individual. It's something greater than. But if it's lower than an individual, the person will step down to it as well. And sometimes the leader may or may not be able to see that that's what's going on, it seems. So is that something that you help leaders with, is identifying what's working within the culture or what's not working within the culture? How do you support when the culture might have been unintentionally created and now it's not serving the bigger picture? How do you help in that situation?
Yeah, it's often seen by others. Sometimes I start with what is called 360 interviews, but not necessarily even within the team. It could be cross-functionally. because it's interesting what you think you're known for versus what you're actually known for, both at an individual and group level. And so I'll work with a leader and like, how do you want to be remembered? When you walk out of the room, what would you like those outcomes to be when your presence is no longer there? What's the impact you want to have made in your interaction? And then I'll ask the same thing of the entire team. And is that the reality today? And you look at those deltas and what's leading those deltas. If it's not exactly how you want it to be, that's the opportunity for modification. And I don't necessarily say change in that aspect because, yes, it's change, but maybe it's going from good to great or just a pivot so that it gets it better aligned. And then we also get curious of, well, why isn't if you say that's how you think people feel and how they remember their interactions with you, and here's the subjective data that I collect,
Yeah.
the experience of the individuals, what do you think is going on? Because it's what you say is not always what they hear. And so people think of the filters of how we present things versus how people interpret them. And that becomes part of the emotional intelligence of understanding the perspectives and emotions of others so that if you can walk in their shoes a bit, you can better communicate and then show up in a way that actually has the impact that you want to.
It's so interesting that you say that because you're talking about the intention, the impact, the being understood, all of those things in there that create advanced communication instead of just communicating, actually figuring out, did what I say get understood, and what's your perspective on what I said, or your perception of what I said, so that you understand the impact, even though it might be an impact that you didn't originally intend. So that is advanced communication, which most people in the workplace aren't reaching because they're basically going, do you understand? Someone says yes, and then they walk away and they're like, okay. And then they wonder why they did something completely different than what they thought they should have done or what would have happened. So it's interesting how you point that out. I'm going to bring this together here between the culture, the values, the emotional intelligence, the attributes that leaders have, and now what you originally talked about, which is the technology. Now that AI is becoming more and more prevalent, it's been here for a very long time, but now it's mushrooming into massive amounts of usage on a public level instead of just what's going on behind the scenes. And it seems to be impacting every single industry. The things you're talking about, humans, their feelings, emotional intelligence, values, culture, how do you see AI playing into all of that when it comes to your role, when it comes to leadership roles? Is this going to change everything? Is it going to make humans even more needed, less needed? What are your thoughts on that?
Is it gonna make humans more needed and less needed? Yes to both. Is it gonna change things? Absolutely. But I remember pre-iPhone, right? Or pre-phone that is a computer in your pocket in the hands of most working individuals on the globe. And it's arguably better now in some sense, but there's also downsides to that as well. So it's us embracing a change, figuring out what that means to us. To me, AI is another work tool, but it's also, you can actually verbally talk back and forth with it to think things through. So it creates a safe zone and it needs to be used in context. So people can ask the questions maybe they didn't ask before. So they might get a little more curious and do it in a safe environment. There's a benefit if people are getting more curious and making less assumptions. Maybe you're going to get higher work quality. Maybe you're going to get some things done if things are being edited and looked at with a cleaner lens than the human error. That's all goodness. So it's figuring out how the new technology, whatever it is at that time, aids and where's that danger zone of if taken too far, it can be a detriment. And so what the AI is not going to replace is our feelings, that emotional energy that we have, the thoughts, the desires, the aspirations, and how we interact with each other. I would argue human centricity is probably even more important because we could default to everything being more automated,
Mm-hmm.
but it might just make us more connected than ever.
Mm-hmm. In your role, where do you see it, AI, in your field in 5 years? And with AI aside, where do you see your field in 5 years?
Well, I live a portfolio life. So when I say my field, I'll speak from the world of coaching and leadership development. I see AI being used, and it's being used today by giving leaders scenarios that they can interact and practice on. Because, you learn, practice, and then apply. So that learning and practice zone, you can actually get more relevant, examples of how to have that hard performance conversation, how to practice selling to a customer that's giving you lots of challenges that feel more real than what we sometimes do in like role playing and learning and development between colleagues. It's never quite the same. So that's happening in the coaching field and training field today. And it's been for a while, but it's getting more and more realistic. And then you have 3D training with things like the Xbox tools and what Meta has for engineers, doctors, lawyers, the type of training that they have to actually simulate true simulations.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing because they're able to do that practice zone in a very safe way that doesn't endanger humans in the real world, if you will, in the wild.
Yeah.
And so the tools can be used in a way that can accelerate for us in many good ways our learning curve and how we can navigate in our workplace. We just have to engage with them and get comfortable in them, that new comfort zone of confidence in being able to navigate them and use them appropriately for our roles. And that's where you get people resisting right now. They don't want that, or they're afraid they're going to lose the human connection. And
Mm-hmm.
the human connection, it's up to each of us to keep that going.
Yeah. I can see that, and at the same time, I wonder for future generations if how whether or not, if they're growing up in a world of AI, whether or not they also emphasize that human connection as well, or if they reject AI, or who knows what will come down the next couple decades as well.
Absolutely. If you look coming out of COVID when we couldn't have some human connections, and we look at how things have swung on like YouTube and TikTok, it's the less perfect, unedited, more human elements are the ones that go viral, the
Mm-hmm.
ones people can relate to. And when you look as the alpha generation, they're not. Um, I was at the Fortune Workplace Innovation Summit back in June, and they had a generational panel. And the alpha representative that was on the stage of the panel said, "Look, the boomers and Gen X and even millennials and the really, you know, hardcore grind. That's great. You were taught to go to school for 20 years, to work for 50 years, and maybe live for 10. I want to live for all of them. And so I think how we've lived in the workplace and how we have given up some of that human connection, that being in the work armor versus the personal armor. There's a world possibility that we could actually become more human than perhaps we have been for the last few decades.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the more fascinating edge that I want to lean into with the work that I'm doing to ensure that that comes to fruition.
That's very exciting. It really, I love embracing the concept of, instead of grinding through all these things to potentially have a life someday, rather living your life every day. And the things that were perhaps a real grind or tedious in nature can be supported with something that can do it faster. And maybe we get to live more. I want to bring that back to you and what you have coming up. One of the things that you and I spoke about earlier was that you're not taking any more one-on-one clients right now. Maybe you will in 2026. But when this episode airs in early 2026, you are likely going to be doing a Mindset Maven cohort, and with this method lab, and it's an 8-week cohort. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And we'll be able to offer the link in the show notes for people as well. Tell us a little bit about what you're about to offer in 2026.
Absolutely. So my company is A3 Culture Lab. We focus on authenticity, autonomy, and accountability in the workplace. And I've had many clients as we've been doing culture work in their teams to go, okay, what does an authentic leader look like? And we've talked a little bit today in our time together about how the fake it to make it doesn't work. So you need to be a consistent leader. And I looked at across all the work I've done in my career and even for myself. I got to the point of burnout in 2017 that I ended up hospitalized because I was always on. I was trying to be something. And I realized it came down to a mind body connection. And that's where I created the Mindset Maven method. And we have our M3 lab, if you will, where I take you through the methodology of the mind body connection and what it really means to be a mindset maven. And Maven stands for an acronym that's really about using certain techniques in order to maintain your energy every day, because that affects our mindset, right? How energetic we are, and what drains us, and really being cognizant so that we have the emotional intelligence, but we also have the physical presence of understanding how we can navigate. So the Maven stands for mindfulness, awareness, visualization, energy, and navigation. And that navigation is really all about navigating change and building the confidence. And I use the techniques and teach the techniques, excuse me, of that framework of the Maven in order so that we can not just become book smart, but street smart on how we navigate our days so that we can lead better and get the output that we want. I'd love to get the same output that a good, grind that I did for 25 years gets me, but I like to be a little smart about it now, maybe even on the edge of laziness in a good way of if I can do the least amount for the largest impact. That's what I've honed and put into the Mindset Maven method.
That is fabulous. That is very exciting. It sounds like the people who go into this cohort are going to come out with the actual, not only concepts, but skills and practice of being able to really get perhaps their energy back, more focused, that ability to contribute from a full cup instead of depletion. That sounds very exciting. And I know that myself and many leaders have drained that cup to the point of either exhaustion or potentially burnout, and that can be very scary. So that's exciting. I'm really happy to share that, and we will put that link in the show notes for everyone. I'd like to ask a couple last things. if you had an amazing piece of advice that you would give your younger self or someone who's in a leadership role or maybe even in your field, what would that piece of advice be?
You are enough.
Awesome.
Because we do know more than we think we do. We just need to learn to listen to ourselves, our whole selves, that signals from your gut, the memories that you have, the desires you want to, that part of you that wants to do this, but the part of you that doesn't want to do that. You are enough and you have the answers within you. And that's what I help people unlock for themselves.
That is wonderful. I love that. And if people want to reach you, where do you hang out the most? You've got an Instagram account and a LinkedIn. How do people reach you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm hoping by the time this comes out in 2026, I'll start getting more active on Instagram. And you can also reach me at on my website at a3culturelab.com.
Excellent. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us. And by all means, everybody reach out and see what's coming up with your cohort that's going to be in the new year.
Thanks so much.